Hey, Dr. Mike here. Are you interested in living forever-ish? Well, then you got to know what's in and what's not. Stay tuned to find out.
You're listening to Live Foreverish, a show dedicated to helping you live just a little longer. Here's your hosts, Dr. Mike and Dr. Crystal Gossard.
All right, welcome to Live Forever-ish. So today, Dr. Crystal and I are going to talk about one of our favorite topics, what's in and what's out for living forever-ish. Adding strong, vibrant, energetic years to your life. It's not just about living longer. It's really about living better, right? At the end, Dr. Crystal, wouldn't you agree?
Yes.
Yeah. So we got some things you want to do and some things you don't want to do if you want to accomplish that, right? And the first one, I got to tell you, I don't think we've ever really talked about this as a topic by itself. We've talked about this a lot in conjunction with other things, like I think stress related episodes and stuff. So in number one, this is what you want to do is practice mindfulness. I really like that. When I was younger, Dr. Crystal, I was a conventional person. When people talk about mindfulness, I was like, oh, whatever. That's just Eastern philosophy, voodoo, whatever. But as I've gotten older, I completely appreciate mindfulness. And what I also would add to that is kind of grounding yourself in the moment, right? Tell us what we've learned about mindfulness.
Well, what we now know is that it's an effective treatment for anxiety. And so we felt it was important to share this study. It was published in November of 2022. And what's unique about the study is they compared mindfulness based stress reduction, and we'll get into what that you know what that consisted of, what the exact process was for that particular intervention, but it was compared to a common medication for anxiety.
Oh, nice, nice. Yeah.
So that's kind of a nice thing. Now, the researchers, I oftentimes you wonder, why do you make the title of the study or what you're looking for, or what you're evaluating in the study, so complicated? So they use this word. Their question
Mhm.
is mindfulness based stress reduction non-inferior
Yeah, yeah.
to this medication? And so it's
Right.
like, what are you trying to say? Can you just say that it's not worse than, basically it works
Yeah.
the same?
Yeah.
They really weren't trying to evaluate if it's better. They just want to say, is it
Yeah.
inferior or not?
Yeah. It's simply a matter of methodology, Dr. Crystal.
Hmm.
To set up a study where you want to claim superiority, the number of people, what they call the N, like the number of people in
Yeah.
the trial, has to reach a certain level. You have to have a certain number of people, and it's a lot of people to be really able to have confidence that your result is better than the standard treatment. So they've purposely made a superiority test very difficult against a standard or gold standard treatment.
Yeah. So in this study, it was escitalopram, which is an SSRI. It's sold under the brand name of Lexapro. People are
Oh
kind of familiar
yeah,
with that brand
I've
name.
written lots of Lexapro scripts.
Right. So it's helps to keep serotonin, which is our feel good, our happy neurotransmitter, around longer so that it can and do its job to help us to feel good. And so it's used for depression as well as anxiety related disorders. So in this study, it was a randomized clinical trial of 276 adults with anxiety disorders. There was an 8-week treatment with mindfulness based stress reduction. And of course, they were comparing it to the medication. And so what the researchers found is that the mindfulness based stress reduction was well tolerated, uh, with comparable effectiveness to a first line medication for patients with anxiety disorders. And it's important because when you really think about something that is, you're not putting a foreign prescription, which may have side effects, into your body. This is something that can help people with anxiety and probably help them with just overall life in general, help them to
Yeah,
have
for
better
sure.
relationships with their families.
Yeah.
And when you see that it's working, it's just as effective. Now maybe we can get insurance companies on board to
Right.
cover
Yeah. Wouldn't that
mindfulness
be nice?
based, these
Yeah.
lifestyle uh treatment options.
Yeah, I mean, this is a good study. Again, it'd be nice to see a few more, but but there are other trials looking at mindfulness and grounding therapy. I know in panic disorder, for instance. So I think there's enough evidence now. I think you're right, Dr. Crystal, that this should be covered. Even if you're a conventional psychiatrist and you just can't help write that Lexapro prescription, you should at least add a second thing in mindfulness therapy. How about
Right.
do both? And maybe they get off the drug faster, or maybe you could cut the dose down. That's integrative medicine, and I don't understand why more clinicians don't get on board with that. It's a little frustrating.
Right. And maybe they think that the typical person just wants to take a pill because the mindfulness, it means that you have to take time out of your day. In this studies, the participants, they had 8 weeks of weekly mindfulness based stress reduction courses. So it wasn't just
Yeah,
it wasn't just something I take my pill and I'm done for the day.
yeah,
These
that's
courses
true.
were offered weekly for 8 weeks, 2.5 hour in-person classes. There was a day-long retreat weekend class during the 5th or 6th week, and 45-minute daily home practice exercises. So then you say, okay,
But
that's a lot.
it is a lot. It is a lot. So the first thing my first comment to that is, well, people want to do just a pill because conventional medicine has trained them to want just a pill, right?
Right.
We're a part of that problem. Number one. Number two, you're still talking about people who didn't take a medicine. They were using mindfulness techniques to lower anxiety. They didn't have to worry about side effects. And you're talking about even probably an overall improvement of well being and lifestyle where a pill is not going to do for you.
That's right. So I think
So,
it's a powerful study. Hopefully,
yeah.
we'll see more.
Well, let's move on to in number two. Again, this is what you want to be doing. Mindfulness was number one. Number two is omega 3s. Now, we've talked about omega 3 intake through supplements, fish for, I mean, I couldn't even tell you how many shows we've mentioned omega 3s, right? And we should,
Right.
right? They're so important. Inflammation, antioxidants, all just linked to cardiovascular health, brain health. It goes on and on and on. But in this specific case, this is about depression, right? Omega 3s and depression. I'm really kind of excited to see what we found here because I've been a big proponent of omega 3s for anybody, especially if you have a mood disorder.
Right. And so the question here that the researchers, again, this was published in January of 2023. So it's another hot off the press
Woo! Look
study
at that.
published in the Journal of Neuropsychopharmacology. And they wanted to identify what is it about the omega 3s that can help with depression? Because we know we already have the research showing that it can improve symptoms of depression. And they wanted to kind of get down to, all right, first of all, we know omega 3s, how they target inflammation and how they resolve the inflammatory process is through the production of SPMs. We've talked about SPMs, these
Yeah.
pro resolving mediators, specialized pro resolving mediators. And what they do, when you have an inflammatory response, they come in and they kind of resolve that inflammation. It helps you to not have the chronic
It's
inflammation. They
it's a
clean
balance,
up.
right? Yeah,
Right,
it's a balance. You need inflammation, but then you got to call back the inflammation, and that's what these mediators ultimately help to do, right?
right. They restore the balance by decreasing pro inflammatory mediators, as well as increasing compounds that have anti inflammatory effects. So the researchers wanted to see, is it the SPMs, are the omega 3s increasing these pro resolving mediators? and really what is the best dose to have that effect. And so that was kind of the background for them,
Yeah.
or what they wanted to observe in this study.
Yeah, it looks like so 4 arms to the study, right? There was a placebo group, and then different doses of the omega threes, right? 1 gram, 2 grams, 4 grams. I know where you fall in there. You'd be in the 4 gram a day, right? Or do
Oh,
you do
oh,
more than
sure.
that now, or four grams
No,
a day?
I'm right at 4. I cut back, and now that I don't have the knee issue I was dealing with,
Oh, that's right. Okay, all
so
right,
I
yeah,
I cut back
yeah.
down to the 4
I'm at the
grams.
2 grams a day, and I know you don't think that's enough.
No, but you eat fish, right, Doctor Mike? You
I,
eat
every
fatty
week
fish.
I have 2 to 3 servings. I mean, 7 days a week. I'd say about 3 of those I eat fish for dinner.
Okay, well, good. So, yes, it was a 12-week study. And before, at the beginning of the study and the end of the study, they measured depression scores, plasma levels of omega 3 fatty acids. We love a study where they actually
Objective,
measure the
objective.
fatty acids,
Yes.
to see did the plasma levels increase. They measured the pro resolving mediators, which means are these omega 3 fats converting into pro resolving mediators? Sometimes, people don't convert them that well.
Yeah.
And then they measured markers of inflammation.
I think let's stop for a moment and talk about how important it is to actually measure omega 3s here, right? And the reason I want to do that, because this is what conventional researchers will often do, have a bias against supplementation, right? Number one, they're just doing surveys most of the time. They survey people and ask, "Are you taking omega 3 fish oil supplements?" Right? They're just asking, number one, which is not reliable. Then they don't do anything to check baseline levels, blood levels, and they simply just pool. Well, these people said they were taking it. These people said they weren't. When we pull it all together, it turns out there's no effect.
Right. Oh,
Yeah, or sometimes there's danger. I mean, whatever. Although, but the
right.
thing is, there's no objective data in those kinds of analyses, right? Here is objective numbers. We're looking at omegas. We're looking at mediators. We're looking at markers. I mean, this is a good design.
Right. And so when you look at the results, the participants who responded to the omega 3 supplementation in the form of EPA, one thing we saw was those participants were able to make more of the pro resolving mediators. And then we saw the increase in the pro resolving mediator was associated with significant reductions in CRP
Yeah,
and depression scores.
very
And
nice.
we
Yeah,
do know that inflammation and depression tend to they go right along each other.
yeah.
They hand in hand.
And it makes sense if the mediator is up, and it's slowing down inflammation, calling back the inflammatory response. It would then make sense that markers of inflammation drop.
Right. And so
Yeah,
I think the takeaway message with depression, rates of depression soaring in America, let's pause and think about, what are you eating? Are you getting your omega 3s? Are you dealing with chronic inflammation?
yeah,
And target that inflammation as a strategy to help to manage the depression.
yeah, yeah. And I guess for a target of the amount of omega threes to get every day, you're right. I do 2 grams of supplementation. I probably get more than that because of the fish I eat. So I probably am, at the end of the week, I'm probably pretty close to what you're doing, 4 grams a day, because you don't eat a lot of fish, right? Is that what you had told me, or
I
you?
eat a couple, yeah, a couple servings. I have to be intentional
Yeah,
with making sure, I tell my husband, we haven't had any fish this
we need
week.
some fish.
And it's usually the weekends is where,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah,
Saturday or Sunday, we'll go to the fish market and find some fresh fish. We're
yeah.
lucky
That's good.
right here in Florida, Dr. Mike. We
I
can get
know
it
there's
fresh
some
off the
good
boat.
choices. Yep. Yeah. So what another great study showing, and again, it's just so simple, right? I mean, here you have mindfulness helping with anxiety, so simple. Here you have omega 3 consumption helping with depression. Simple things, natural, good for you, no side effects, and good results. Let's go to N number 3. So that's mindfulness and omega 3s. Those are the first two. In number three, this is what you want to do now, right? If you want to live forever-ish. And this is something that I think we need to talk about more. It's called NAFLD, but it's basically non-alcoholic liver disease, all right, or fatty liver disease. This is where, not because of alcohol, but because of the foods we eat, inflammation, processed stuff, the gunk, the sugar, our livers just get engorged,
Right.
right? They have a hard time processing all of this. So we call it non alcoholic fatty liver. And it turns out vitamin E, besides some lifestyle changes too, right? It'd be nice to cut out some of the
Yes.
sugar, but
Uh-huh.
vitamin E can play a good role in this, right?
Right. And so this is or was a meta-analysis, which means that the researchers scoured the literature to find all the studies they can find. So you do, a search in usually PubMed, and you search the literature to find all the studies with vitamin E and non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. And usually you have your inclusion criteria, exclusion criteria. In this particular case, 9 articles were included, enrolling a total of 569 patients. There were 274 patients in the vitamin E group when you kind of total up all of those studies, and 295 patients in the placebo group.
Right. Very nice.
Eight
Yeah.
of those studies compared the changes in ALT levels. And so, Dr. Mike, do you want to share or talk about ALT and some
Yeah.
of those markers, ALT,
Yeah.
AST?
ALT, AST, and there's other ones that you can look at. At the end of the day, these are simply markers of liver inflammation. And so the higher these go, it's telling us that there's some sort of inflammatory process going on in the liver. It could be viral related, in some cases, alcohol related. But
Hmm.
in this case, those have been ruled out. And what you're left with is the standard American diet and the stress that we live with, right? The liver filters everything that comes through. And so if it's a lot of processed foods, processed flours and sugars, the liver just gets engorged, causes some inflammation, and that you can measure that with these enzymes because they're going to increase in your bloodstream. I want to back up for a second and just mention too. A meta-analysis is a powerful tool for us in the supplement industry. We don't have the billions and billions and billions of dollars that the pharmaceutical companies have, right? Where they can do all kinds of studies with thousands of it. A meta-analysis allows us to increase, in a sense, the number of subjects in
Hmm.
in similar studies, and it adds more credibility
Yeah, it
to the
adds
result.
credit. Right, it adds credibility, and what I like is occasionally, and we find this with the dietary supplement industry, you may have a study that says this doesn't work. And then you'll have a random study that says that doesn't work. And then, but sometimes we like to look at what we call the preponderance of evidence. We
Right, right.
like to look at, in general, when you look at the studies as a whole, what is the message that we can take away? And so that's also beneficial when you're looking at meta analysis,
Yeah,
to
it
kind of
helps.
say, okay, does this really work? And
Yeah,
so in 8 of the studies, they compared the changes in ALT. Again, on your typical lab work, you'll hear your doctor may say your liver enzymes. That's
that's what
that's
they are.
another
Yeah,
way we describe these. So the ALT improved in the vitamin E group compared to placebo in 8 of those studies. 7 of the studies compared the change in AST, another liver enzyme, between the patients who received vitamin E and placebo. And the average reduction in AST levels was significantly greater in the patients receiving vitamin E, as well as changes in BMI. So the participants who, who were supplementing with vitamin E saw improvements in their body mass index,
nice. That's
meaning
good.
they
Yeah,
lost some weight.
yeah. That's pretty good. And again, so this is 569 patients enrolled over 9 studies who had non-alcoholic fatty liver. Correct? They had this condition.
Right.
Alcohol's been ruled out. Viral issues have been ruled out. They had a fatty liver. They had some increases in these enzymes, and simply adding vitamin E made a significant change,
Right, and I think it's
positive change.
important. Yes, and it's also important to bring up that conventionally there is no medication, there's no treatment outside of lifestyle changes
Right.
for fatty liver.
Yeah.
So to see that hopefully along with lifestyle changes, right? Diet
Yeah.
changes, exercise changes, adding in some vitamin E can also help you in your efforts.
Yeah, it was interesting. The very last thing they noted in all these studies was that there were no changes in what are called fibrosis scores. I just want to mention that, and that's not surprising because if some of these patients actually had developed areas of fibrosis or fibrotic liver, that's dead liver. That's just collagen now. Nothing helps that. I mean, when you have fibrosis, there's not a thing other than liver transplant. There's not a thing in conventional, there's not a thing on supplement side that can turn a fibrotic scar into a healthy liver cell. That's just not going to happen. So that's not surprising. But when you look at those liver enzymes, that these are good. These are good results that really conventional medicine doesn't have much to say about.
Right.
All right, now those are the things you want to do. Living foreverish, stronger, energy, vibrant lives. That's great stuff. But there's things you don't want to do. Um, and I find this one interesting because I think you and I've had some conversations about this. But what you don't want to do is eat meals late in the day, or what they call late meal times. Is that correct?
Correct. And so we can define that. But in this study, the the title is Late Meal Times Encourage Weight Gain. Now, what's considered late? In the study, the late meal period, those individuals ate at about well, their last meal was 9 p.m. So they started
Whoa.
1 p.m., 5 p.m., and 9 p.m. The
1 p. So that 1 p.m. That means they're not eating anything until lunch, basically. Is that what?
Right. So these are the probably they're skipping breakfast and they're eating at 1 and then they're ending at 9. Now the early meal study period, 8 meals around 9, the typical
Yeah.
time, 1 p.m. and 5 p.m. was the last meal.
Right.
And so they compared the two, the total amount of calories and physical activity during the two study periods was identical. The meals and physical activity was controlled. And what they found was the late eating. Those individuals were hungrier. And you saw decreased wake time energy expenditure, so they were burning less calories when they were awake,
Yeah. Yeah.
and there
Wow.
was altered adipose tissue gene expression favoring lipid
A bit
storage, which means
storage. Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
storing more fat, but this is happening at the genetic level. Like your
Right.
genes are saying, "Hey, let's store the fat."
It says something, doesn't it? If you're able to genetically alter how you are storing and burning fat, you're really changing your overall body's sense of am I is there enough food out there? And if you're able to change the genetics to say I'm going to store more fat, that's your body saying that you're doing something wrong, that you shouldn't be balanced
Right.
that way. Even though the calorie intake was the same, they were increasing more fat, which tells me that their bodies actually, because maybe of that early time of not eating, thought there was food supply issues. So they're storing more fat to guard against that famine in that morning time when they're not eating.
Well, the ultimately what the researchers also consider is that there were changes in the circadian rhythm. Nighttime is the time for sleeping,
Not nine
not for
o'clock is.
eating.
I listen. I'm in bed by 9 o'clock. I'm not eating at 9 o'clock.
Right. So if you're following the sleep wake cycle, right, by 9 o'clock, regardless, of course, Alaska may be a different situation, but regardless of where you are, 9 o'clock is dark
Yeah,
outside.
it's time to
And
go to
so
bed.
it's time to go to bed. You should be sleeping.
Yeah.
So it's really eating according to uh the the clock, the
Yeah.
circadian clock, the day and night cycle.
Yeah.
And if you mirror your meals around those times, then you can
It's
have better
it,
weight control.
Yeah, I think it's better for your metabolism, better for how you're managing energy, cell energy storage versus release. I mean, it's just you're better in tune to that if you're doing the early meal stuff. So I think it makes perfect sense to me.
Yes, and it's nice to have specific times. This
Yeah.
was a controlled study, and so now we have our goal, right? 5 p.m., which is not really realistic. I
Well,
would say 6, 7.
we can all agree there's ranges within this. I don't think you have to be strict, but the point is it's dark outside, go to bed. You shouldn't be eating at 9, 10 o'clock at night. You get up in the morning, lights up, you eat breakfast. You get some food. It could be, you don't have to be anything major, but you get some food for your metabolism. I think there's room to wiggle in here. Use 9 and 1 as 5 as maybe guidelines or something, right?
Right.
Okay.
Mhm.
Wow, fantastic, fantastic in and out. What's in and what's not in for living forever-ish. I love these shows because it gives me a lot of good ideas. Right? Don't you like that? It gives you a lot of good ideas.
I
Uh,
do. I immediately incorporate most of these things.
yeah. Well, I can tell you, I'm pretty good with the omegas already. I'm pretty good with the early meal plan. Need to work on mindfulness a little bit. That would be something to work on. I
I
think that,
agree. That's the one thing I was thinking. I think I'm generally mindful, but the level of what they did in that study.
yeah, it's one thing to practice some of these quick mindfulness things you see online, like a 10-second thing.
Right.
I think like almost do it like an exercise program, right? Where for
Right.
30 minutes you're grounding yourself in that moment in various ways. Dr. Crystal, thanks for joining me today. Thank you for everyone listening. Don't forget at liveforeverish.com, there are several more episodes you can download, like and share, comment, and of course subscribe. When you get there, there's two things, the 1-2 punch. Give us your email so you join the Live Foreverish family, and then you can subscribe to your favorite podcast service right there on the site. That's liveforeverish.com. I'm Dr. Mike. Thanks for listening.